Hello and welcome back. So continuing on with our discussion, we had just left off with Zach going over what the problem was as far as the timeline being expanded the way it was. So we went from the 200, 300, 400 years all the way up to thousands of years. It didn't work out right. And I had said in the last video that in this video we were going to hear Nelson and NATO's thoughts. And during the time between videos, Gavin finally decided to stop playing Magic the Gathering and has joined us. So he will be here with us. So hello, Gavin.
Hey.
So Nelson, let's start with you because you were expressing some of your interests when dealing with sci-fi type futuristic worlds.
Yeah, I really do like near future sci-fi a lot more than distant future sci-fi. That's the basis of everything that I might say, is that in general, I just prefer near future sci-fi, and 2,000, 3,000 years just feels so distant and disconnected. It just doesn't feel like it's us anymore. It doesn't feel like it's really the humans anymore. It feels like it's some strange alien civilization that looks like humans. And I always liked, with like Deus Ex, for example, being relatively near future, and you go in the game, there's still firearms, there's still, the Statue of Liberty, but with the head off, but and stuff like that. And I really like that sort of environment. Not necessarily everything being run down, but I like seeing stuff that I might recognize in the current 21st century, in elements of that stuff still in this society, but on top of that, there's also these additional scientific breakthroughs and additional whatevers.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So that's just. Yeah. Do I need to clarify on any particular point, or?
I don't necessarily think so, because really, I think what you're bringing to the table more than anything is personal preference. How do you feel? How do you feel about the possibility that that we could end up with corporations that actually lasted for thousands of years? Where do you stand on that?
Well, see, if corporations actually, to be honest, I think that would be a great indication of despite the fact that I still really do like near future stuff, a corporation or a group of corporations that stay alive for 1,000 years really speaks for the success of capitalism.
Well, sure. You'd want to become an investor early, you know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, but what I'm saying, though, is that, if they're not portrayed as these big evil corporations, but in reality the natural progression of capitalism to a stable point in time would be an interesting thing to explore. But that's my idea. I don't think it's impossible. I think the corporations we have now, it might be impossible. The way we view capitalism now may be possible.
Uh-huh.
But I think that if capitalism ever truly, really not only succeeded, but became stable to the point where it could last thousands of years, I think that would be a great thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that I wouldn't have any issues seeing it in a game. In fact, I would think it'd be pretty cool.
Okay. Chris, your thoughts?
I kind of agree with Nelson on the point that if you're going to have it in the far future, you need some sort of grounding element to make it seem more accessible to the player. Such as one of the ways you could do it is you could say, in the past, these basically have the corporations lasting the length of time. So you are keeping the continuity of in 2050 or whatever it is when the object impacts.
Uh-huh.
You have these corporations, and then however long in the future we want to set it, those corporations still exist. They might slightly have changed quite a bit, but they are still called the same corporations, still do the same sorts of things. However, I don't like the idea of those corporations being in existence for so long, because civilizations have risen and fall in that time, and corporations are... Yeah, I don't think that would work.
Sure, they have in the past, but wouldn't you like to see a society in the future that's actually stable enough to survive for so long? Wouldn't that be a beacon of hope?
It's not about what I want, it's about what I think would happen. I don't think corporations would survive leaving Earth in the way that we want them to. because of massive asset loss, basically. So if you leave Earth, you leave all your assets behind.
Well, no, yeah.
Well, Gavin, what are your thoughts?
Well, see, fundamentally, I agree with both Nelson and Chris. I particularly Chris's point about the age of civilizations. At no point ever has there been a civilization that's managed to last a millennium entirely intact.
Yeah,
From that sort of corporate standpoint. And between amalgamation and the general tendency for the sort of sharks coming along and eating the little guppies, I think if we're going that route, the most likely would be, sadly, your standard capitalist, monetarist, hyper-massive corporations that you see in every dystopian future vision that's been written for the last 100 years. You know, it's I think it's one of those cliches that's become that because it is a sort of a logical analysis of humans and the way we are and what's likely to happen in the future makes that the most likely future. Equally, though, in terms of time scale, I think nowadays we're much more accepting of the idea that in 100 years' time, the world could easily be, technology could easily be hugely more advanced than it is now. Not that long ago, the idea of, things like quantum computers and things, quantum computing is a theoretical thing, but it's, every part of the process has been done already, to my knowledge.
It's entering the realm of realism.
Yeah, which means that we live in a world where 50 years in the future is not what 50 years in the future would have appeared to, say, the Victorians.
Sure, but if we back up into the 60s when we were traveling to the good old moon, back then thinking of where we would be in 2011, people saw hover cars. You're absolutely right. Hover cars, and we would be, doing much further exploration than just the moon. If we were still going to the moon, it would just be for mining operations, for some use we found of the moon rocks there or other minerals found on the moon.
Making portal surfaces with white.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, at what point do you draw the line? We're talking about the implications of realism on a game involving space travel and magic and
Well,
aliens.
So hang on. We don't know what's out there in the universe. There may be.
But what I'm saying,
somebody might be getting their butt whooped at this very moment with a fireball somewhere on the other side of 5 galaxies over. Who knows?
Swallowed by a little dog.
That, absolutely. But right now, what I'm concerned with is starting out at 2057, where Zach's at, with an impact, and then moving forward to a point where we have the technology to do space travel, more complex space travel, and then even further so when we're on Alethea with the ability to do, some of the things we'd like to do with nanotechnology and, very, very advanced forms of bioengineering that's just light years away from where we are now. That's my concern.
That's fine. Sorry, one more thing that in terms of having it in the nearer future, is because I agree with the idea that if we have it in the distant future, it kind of takes away from the idea that it's humans and Alethians, because it's like the sort of.
How can you even say Alethians? You don't know them. I can see you saying it doesn't feel like humans no more. That's cool, but come on.
No. It's the distance in time. You've got humans and Alethians, and what Nelson said about the humans being, it could be another race and the Alethians, because we're so far divorced in time from what we understand as humanity. But at the other end of the scale, and pushing it right to the other end of the scale, if you're going for near future, and a sort of, not realism per se, but a feeling, a grounding in the current world,
Right.
then you kind of have to look at the idea of
Oh,
corporations.
Chris, do you have your cell phone on?
Yeah, I've just chucked it away from my monitor.
Okay, thanks. Awesome.
If say, what are we meaning by near future? 200 to 300 years.
Correct. And I do, and keep this in mind while you're throwing out your ideas. I do want to try to ground this as realistic as possible instead of just taking the out with.
I think
that's
that
just a game.
is that the nearer the present we come, the more likely it is that you would lose some feeling of reality due to the fact of not being able. You know, if in 50 years' time there's going to be Sony, like Sony, Universal Time, AOL, Warner, or something will be one big company.
Right.
But it will still be iPods. It will still be technology from Apple, and it will still be the brand names that we recognise from now.
Sure, I completely agree. That's and you're now getting to the heart of my question and
that's a
concern.
problem.
How many years, though, in your mind, do you think we push it out to where the story feels realistic with us, or a good number of us, leaving planet Earth for Alethea? Does 300 years still feel too soon? Go ahead, Nelson.
I still really don't. I think there's a lot of other things, though. In addition, we're going to talk about language, clothing, a different way people communicate with each other. We're going to have to. I mean, do you really think we communicate the same now than we'll do in 1,000 years? We're more likely to communicate similarly in 300 years than 1,000 years. And as far as Gavin's comment about current brands, that's easily. I mean, just like every single. I mean, look at Deus Ex: Human Revolution. They invented about roughly 1,000 brand names, or maybe it was a few hundred. It was a lot of brand names where they created all these different brands, from everything from doors to media outlets to newspapers. There's no reason why we can't invent our own brands. We don't have to have an Apple or Microsoft sitting around.
Sure, but real quick,
you do see it in games. You run into that situation of, let's go and have a look on the ePod, and the pair computers I've seen in a game. I'm sure I have.
I do want to throw this out there real quick, Nelson, based off what you just said with things like language. We've got two timelines we're really dealing with. We've got the timeline between the event that's going to take place in, say, 50 years or so from now, until the moment that we're setting foot on Alethea. And then we got the timeline, as Zach's drawn here on the blue board, from that point to where the game actually is going to begin, because we've got to give some time for some sort of rich historic development to occur between the humans and the Aletheans, I think, to make the game more interesting.
True, but you don't want to go too far with that either, because as Zach said earlier before on camera, we still want we don't want a bunch of people, or I think NATO maybe did say this, but we don't want to have humans and Aletheans living together in utter harmony. We still want there to be some sort of, not necessarily conflict, but discrepancy between the two cultures that is evident enough and makes it more interesting.
Okay, now
I'd say you would want a conflict, just not necessarily a war.
Yeah, conflict is fun.
So all story needs conflict. Yeah, you need a triggering conflict at the start of the story, game,
well, just
film,
us
or whatever.
stepping foot on the planet would cause conflict with.
Yeah, but that's the point.
Sure.
If too much time has passed, then that conflict. It'd be like starting a western with the guy riding off into the sunset at the beginning of it.
Could be a good movie.
Yeah, I don't see that. I think the conflicts could be much more complex further in the future with different factions or underground groups.
Well, I think it's how you decide to look at it. I'm wondering, we're already 15 minutes in. If we want to maybe. Because right now we're starting to talk about this part of the timeline as opposed to this part of the timeline.
Okay, let's go ahead real quick. Go ahead and hold it, Nelson, since you still have a few things you want to talk about. Since I said I wanted to keep these to 10-minute videos or right around that, and we're now right at just about 15 minutes. Let's go ahead and wrap this one up, and we'll continue the discussion in the next video. Thanks, guys.